All right, it is 8 o'clock, and this is City Hall Council Chambers. This is the Redevelopment Authority meeting, and it is Wednesday, December 6, 2023. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of the previous minutes from November 1st, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve minutes.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from November 1st, 2023. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is public comment. Any public comment?
I have a question.
Please come to the microphone and state your name and address, please.
I'm Kristen Fish-Peterson at 722 Traveler Lane in Madison, Wisconsin. Question about speaking during public comment versus during an agenda item. Is there the opportunity for us to speak during an agenda item?
If the committee grants you floor privileges, yes.
Okay.
Which, that's fine.
Okay, thank
We
you.
will, I mean, that's fine.
Just wanted to make sure I didn't blow my opportunity.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to consider resolution authorizing a developers agreement between the City of Merrill, Wisconsin and Wendorf Construction LLC for residential development on TID number 7. At this time, it's still kind of in limbo, correct, Rod?
From my understanding from Mr. Wendorf, they will be closing in the property in January. At that time, we will finalize the development agreement. City Attorney Hayden and Corey Bennett and myself met with Dave last week, and we went through it and added a few things and discussed it to the point where we feel comfortable with it. Those changes have been made, but we're not going to finalize it until the sale is closed,
Okay.
which my understanding will be in January. Is that correct, Todd?
Yeah, we have an agreement, verbal agreement.
Okay.
So it's moving forward in January. We're making the transaction in January.
Yep.
Okay. So then this will come to the January meeting,
Well,
Probably February.
February.
we may not have a January meeting then.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to update on potential grants for the Mathis Building rehabilitation, 419 West Main Street, TID number 8.
Thank you so much.
Everybody knows you, but could you just state your name and stuff for?
Sure. My name is Stephanie Springborn. I own Winds and Paradox, doing business as Winds Paradox, and I'm here to update the RDA on developments for the 419 West Main Street building, the Matthias building. I have a prepared speech because I'm rather nervous, if that's all right.
That's okay.
Hello, everyone. First, I would like to wish everyone a pleasant holiday season, and I would like to extend thank yous to all of you. At the November RDA meeting, this resolution carried for the city to act as a pass-through agent for grants for this project. I would like to specifically thank Ms. Unerdal. I appreciate so much your ongoing efforts as I approach the city of Merrill. I would also like to thank the RDA here, Ms. Fish-Peterson, Ms. Duranzo, Mr. Akey, and Mr. Hayden. As time has gone on, I've realized I'm spending time talking about the project, but you may not know me. Time is precious. It really is precious, especially at this time of year. So I'll try to make this as brief as possible. I'm a Merrill native, graduating second in my class from Merrill Senior High School in 1983. I graduated from UW-Stevens Point with a degree in mathematics and a minor in German. In 1992, I completed my Master's of Business Administration degree from Cardinal Stritch University. For 12 years, I worked at Church Mutual until I stayed home with my son in his early years. I taught at Trinity Lutheran and Wisconsin Valley Lutheran for 10 years, then went back into the business world working for Wisconsin Physician Service, WPS Health Insurance, for the VA contract, when they had the VA contract. I have now been employed with Walmart as management for 6 years. My areas of responsibility vary, but in any one day I'm responsible for a team of 30 direct reports to a store of over 100 associates at one time. In total, we employ at that particular site over 400 associates. I purchased the building I now call Matthias from a private company for $140,000. This individual had purchased the building from the city for $1. I bought the building because I could not imagine the thought of watching this iconic building being demolished. My goal has always been the restoration of this building to an operating and enjoyable entity providing service to the Merrill community. I also have a goal of enhancing my finances with a supplementary income. My margins can be slim, but they have to be sustainable over the long run. One of my goals this morning is to update you on the activities of the past month. I believe in your packet you have a timeline describing what has gone on since we last met in November. And you can see that there's been a progression of events. Particularly, I want to thank you because since then, on November 27th, we received notification from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation that this project has been approved by its internal review committee for an application for that grant. I want to thank you again for approving the resolution to be a pass-through agent. A few days ago, the Lincoln County Economic Development Office received notice that HUD has reopened the HOPE 6 grant program. The deadline for submission is December 11th, this coming Monday. To meet this deadline, application materials for the grant are now being finalized. This is a separate funding opportunity requiring the cooperation of the city, as it must be the grant applicant. My understanding is that this application will be supported by the committee. At the conclusion of the November meeting, I submitted an application for this project to the city's TIF funding for District 8. In that application, I requested an amount of 10% of the upcoming project's cost. The other document I included for preparation for this meeting is the quote for renovation from my contractor, Finnegan Construction, for $1.476 million. I requested consideration for TIF funding of $140,000. First, I want to just say that I am grateful for even being considered for such amount of money and for a grant. But I have been told that there are now certain qualifying considerations that might be reducing the grant amount requested by me. The first qualification is building valuation. I've heard the proposed valuation for the building is in the area of $770,000. Now, I am not qualified to dispute that number. I don't know, market value, appraised value, assessed value, except to point out the proposed $770,000 value of a renovated, like-new masonry building works out to only be $60 per square foot. I do know that that is not a realistic number. To construct a building of this size and quality would be multiples of the $60 now being proposed. I would ask that this standard be raised to a bare bones minimum of $120 per square foot if this value is critical to the RDA's decision. I've also heard that the funding will be impacted by past action affording $10,000 per individual home construction. Plans for the building include 9 apartment units. Each of the apartments provide housing to a specific population that simply cannot make the economic leap to a single-family dwelling. I would suggest to the committee that if a per-unit criteria is applied to the grant request, it could easily be in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $30,000 per unit to assist a portion of our population which is in dire need of affordable housing. As an example, I happened upon a conversation with a female employee of a local business. She works as a receptionist. She's in her mid to late 20s, and she lives with her parents because she cannot afford rent. And I have no issues with living with parents. Don't get me wrong, not one bit. But it was an illustration of the housing which is available to her currently. I do believe strongly that her comment reflects the reality of this demographic. To be a piece of the answer for that housing, for the economic realities faced by a beginning workforce, maybe that helps in the retention of our population. There has been mention of job creation. Yes, I look to hire employees for a coffee shop. Yes, I will need to hire maintenance staffing. I already employ one person to take care of the shoveling and things of that sort. The remaining commercial spaces will be responsible for their own employment needs. But I would note that according to records as of September 2023, Lincoln County stood with an unemployment rate of 3.1%. Businesses are looking for employees. I know that personally. There is a shortage of people, not jobs. I would also like to state that the building project has been and will be a project of development which involves the community labor force. I remember when we were installing Lincoln windows, I really remember this well. There's many beautiful moments, and the contractors made several notes of this, that there were community members who would stop their cars, by the building to tell us they had made those windows. The lumber supplied for the roof project was purchased through what was then known as Toronto's Building Supplies. All masonry and carpentry work was done by local contractors. Intentions are to continue supporting local businesses whenever possible to do so, and it usually is. I view the completion and the opening of the Matthias Building as significant in the development of the economic improvement of the West Side. There's housing, taverns, eateries, dance studio, and retail establishment. And to have a mixed-use building with office spaces, retail, and residential to this scale would be an incredible value-added component to that West Side. Finally, I do not know how one can value community pride, but I do think we should recognize that this building has a long history with our community. When renovated, it can continue to serve the community for many years to come. This is not a short-term proposal, it's a long-term proposal. Therefore, I'm requesting a TIF funding of over $200,000 to the project to be used in the course of constructions. Thank you so much.
So the update on the grant, it's got to go, the deadline for the grant proposal is the 11th. Is that correct?
For the HUD grant, yeah. I'll give a little bit more detail on the grants and what is expected and how we're going to move forward with these. So my name is Elsa Duranzo. I'm with the Lincoln County Economic Development Corporation. I've been helping Stephanie. So when I got the nickel tour from Bill, he made a stopover at Stephanie's building, and this is how all of this, kind of got started, the ball rolling here. And as you know, I am and have been a grant writer for other organizations, so I started looking for grants. And we came across the HUD Hope 6 grant that at that time we had 2 weeks to complete, which is unheard of for a grant of that size and from the federal government. However, in my experience, if we can write a grant to that caliber, and it will set the tone for every other grant opportunity that comes across our desk. So we did miss that deadline, but because of the preparation that we had set up at that beginning time, when I met with Melinda Osterberger of WEDC for the first time, she let us know about that CDI grant. So the CDI grant is the one that we have the development agreement that was just presented to us. That one is basically, it's a first come, first serve. So the sooner that we can get all of our materials together and submitted to that board, the sooner they can make a decision on the $200,000. The HUD grant is due on December 11th. And the things that we need next are another developer agreement or a letter of support from the City of Merrill. And additionally, a firm commitment of matching funds. For the amount of TIF that Stephanie is asking for, it is well over the 5% request of the HUD grant matching funds. With that, we also have leverage from our partners who are in this project. We have the United Way of Merrill, as well as the North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board and the Job Center of Wisconsin, which will be supporting our holistic view of a sustainable ecosystem, or a self-sustainable ecosystem within the Matthias building. And yes, I would like to note that, 2 weeks is not a lot of time, or even 1 week now. But when we found out that it was reopened, it wasn't extended, the deadline, that never happens. So I have a lot of questions that I've asked, HUD and the counterparts at HUD of why that is. And the big one would come down to that definition of what the housing units are. I think a lot of communities did not apply for this, and the ones that did had an incorrect idea of what that meaning was. So now that we have another chance, I'm here to put forth the work to get it done. And something that is listed in this HUD grant over and over again is that the stronger support from the municipalities that will be benefiting from these dollars, the greater the chance of the award. Thank you.
Elsa, you mentioned 5% match. What does that come out to?
So we're asking for 500,000 from HUD, so 5% of that, I think it's 20,000, 26,000. How much? Something like that. Is it 20,000 of 500,000?
25,000.
25,000?
Good morning again. I'm Kristen Fish-Peterson. I'm with Redevelopment Resources. I might be a familiar face to some of you as our firm served the village or the city of Merrill for several years in the early mid-2000s, from 2010 for about 5 or 6 years after that in redevelopment activities. So I'm familiar with 419 West Main. I'm familiar with how long it's been a project in the city of Merrill and how long Stephanie's owned it. And I'm here today. Stephanie reached out to me to represent her and to help her talk through and think through the financing on this. My experience is unique and valid because I recently developed a building myself in Forest City, Iowa, that was nearly the same type of project. It had a $1.4 million construction budget. I created 8 units of housing and redevelopment projects like this take an incredible amount of funding. I had support from the city, the county, and the state on this project. They just don't happen. They don't make financial sense because you can't earn in revenue, in rents, what it would take to pay a loan to fund the entire project. So incentives are very important. They're critical to projects like this. Speaking from my own experience, because my project was approximately the same size of financially as Stephanie's project is, I understand how the dynamics work with, how do you set up a sources and uses? And I did prepare a sources and uses for this, showing you the sources of funds and the uses. May I pass that out? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So when I start creating a pro forma for a project like this, I look at the dollars in rent that this project can generate, because that's going to tell us how much debt we can borrow. And between owner's cash and debt, the majority of the project should come from those two sources. Everything else is a gap that needs to be filled in some other way. Stephanie has invested over $600,000 of her own money in acquisition, new windows, a roof, cleanup, all of that kind of stuff over the years, and that investment should not be overlooked. She's also paid over $40,000 in taxes, property taxes already, and carrying costs since she's owned the building. And that ownership, that investment is approximately 27% of the total project, taking this building from a potential wrecking ball to what it will be, hopefully in the next couple of years. She would look to borrow from a bank, and debt, the revenue from the project could support approximately $750,000 in debt. She has not spoken with the bank on that amount yet, because we want to make sure that we're looking at the entire sources and uses and the likelihood of these funds coming in, and she will be speaking to the bank shortly. We're looking at the CDBG grant of $500,000, the CDI grant of $200,000, and then the gap after that ends up at $241,000. Certainly there are items that may or may not come to the full cost that was estimated. They might be over, they might be under. We might not get one of these grants in the full amount. So this isn't set in stone, but this is an example of the magnitude of the project and the amount of the request. TIF by nature is an incentive that but for the incentive, the project won't happen. And you can see if we took away this $241,000 TIF request, the project just won't happen unless we find other sources for it. So we're respectfully requesting $241,000 in TIF funds, or some combination of TIF and whatever else the city could come up with, if you have ARPA funds or other funds. But we just wanted to present the sources and uses at this time and show that in projects like this, in my experience too, and I am consulting with the Village of Weston, Mount Horeb, Whitewater, a bunch of other communities across the state as an extension of their staff right now. For a community to participate at 10% of a total project is not a heavy ask from a total project perspective. Many projects end up in that 20 to 25% range. So not fully understanding the health of the TIF district. I'm not aware of the health of the TIF district, but I am saying that this project at this amount is, at 10% is a reasonable request. I can answer any questions you might have.
Committee, do you have any questions? Mr. Icky?
I think 10% of the increased value, we could justify 10% of, talking about initial acquisition from several years ago, the 600,000, and some of the other costs. I don't think in the past the city has done that. So I don't think we're comfortable doing that.
Doing what exactly? I'm sorry.
The initial acquisition cost is 600,000. That's
It was 140. But she's invested 600 total,
Right.
with windows and.
She already has that into the building. I mean, that's something I don't think we would consider, existing costs and what she has done up to this point. That's kind of what we have in the past. It's been all on the improvements from this day forward. So I think if you take that 600,000 out of there, and then we looked at a couple different things, and I think Kathy had explained, and I had talked with Stephanie about what we're doing for housing on the 10,000 per 200,000. We're just trying to be fair with everybody, and I understand that this is a special project, and that's up to the board to determine the amount, but we got to be consistent. So that's where I think most of us are at. I guess, Mark, if you have any comments to add on that?
You may want to have that in closed session.
Okay.
I have some thoughts about that, but before that, question for you: how much did you get in TIF financing for your project?
Zero.
So in Iowa?
Zero.
No, he's asking.
In Iowa?
In Iowa? Okay.
Yes.
I can explain the financing on that. Iowa does TIF a little differently. I got $250,000 from the city in TIF. I also received $80,000 from the county. I received a $100,000 grant from the state, and I received over $500,000 in tax credits, which one was a workforce housing tax credit, and one was a redevelopment tax credit. I'm sorry, did I say $300,000 in tax credits, which I sold for equity, and that turned into instant cash. And I will tell you, my debt on the project is $650,000. The building needed to appraise at 7-something. It appraised at $1 million 2 years ago. So it was a former hospital that was blighted. The county owned it. They gave it to me for $1. So they were going to tear it down, but most of the community, Forest City is a town of 3,000 people. Most of the people had been born in that hospital or had worked there. And there was a lot of sentimental value. It was built very solidly, kind of like the old armory. It would have been a shame to tear it down. And so now we have 8 very nice apartments, and they're market rate apartments. And understanding, we needed the building to appraise at $750,000. It ended up appraising at $1 million, which helped the bank feel comfortable with lending me the $650,000. Stephanie's building is going to have to appraise at probably $1 million, so the bank will be comfortable lending $750,000. So there will be that will depend. The other thing the point I wanted to make is certainly Stephanie's paying taxes on the value that has been created in that building now, but if this building is valued, and Kathy has probably already done the math on what this building will generate in taxes. I think I've always had, as an economic development consultant, I worked for the city of Wausau from 2001 to 2008, and I've been in redevelopment resources from 2009 until now. And I've consulted with many communities. Every project is different, and you want to be consistent when it's apples to apples, but this project is not apples to apples. You've had this building sitting there for decades, not contributing anything to the community. Stephanie is planning high-quality housing in there for people who can't afford high-quality housing, basically. She's providing 9 units of really nice housing, and she will be creating commercial spaces that will enhance the other commercial spaces in that area on the west side. A coffee shop is desperately needed over there. Even the First Street Coffee Station had said they'd welcome another coffee shop on the west side, because coffee shops are always places of gathering. They're employment places. They're places for entertainment. They're dynamic. They're vibrant. Any other business that goes in there is going to create commercial traffic. You're just going to add a lot of life to that corner of the community. So I want you to consider this as a unique project, and every project is different and deserves its own spotlight or its own scrutiny.
You said yours were market rate. My understanding, if that HUD grant is applied for, that these will not be market rate?
That's correct. For the first tenant. Yes.
What is that? What does the first tenant mean? I mean, they could be there for a month, and then after that, it's...
Yes.
Are you sure about that?
Yes. Yeah, I verified that. It's just the first time.
I have a couple questions. You plan on 2 retail areas on the ground floor, or 3? 2?
At least 2.
2. And one, you mentioned coffee shop. Do you have a prospective tenant for that? That be yourself, or?
Myself.
Okay. And it's still gonna have the art gallery down there, or is it
A
gonna?
combination of art and coffee.
Okay, and that's the 2 businesses that'll go in that space down there?
No, there's office space that will be available.
Office space, not
And then also
not retail, but office.
And then a photography studio that is interested in space as well, operating out of there.
Okay, so 4 different.
The coffee shop and art gallery will be in the same space.
Together, okay. All right.
In the pro forma, I created 3 commercial spaces.
Okay. What are you doing for parking at the apartments?
You need to come up here.
For parking, it is my understanding that the city will provide either by parking pass or make
Lease.
available parking spaces down the block. It's, oh gosh, maybe 50 yards, if that, through that alleyway is the two parking lots.
Okay, city offering you a special rate on that, or how's that being negotiated, or has that been negotiated?
It hasn't been negotiated, only the fact that it's available, and it'll be repaved. Mhm.
Okay, so that's city-owned parking lot that you intend to utilize for a
And-
fee?
For a fee. Mhm.
Okay. Your valuation now is at $770,000, but that's for the new improvements?
After consulting with the city building inspector, or city assessor, that's my best projection based on the current value of the building.
For the whole building, or for the improved
The
building?
improved, what the increase in tax increment
Increase,
value will
okay,
be.
all right. Or it is an X value, but with these improvements, it's gonna increase in value by $770,000.
2,770.
No, it'll increase that amount. That's my best estimate based on that information that we have.
My understanding, so that's the additional tax increment.
That's the additional dollar value. You're looking probably having a building closer to about $913,000,
Okay.
give or take something, and it's hard to predict because we're going to do a complete reassessment next year, so all these values are based on where we are today.
My last question, this is internal, I guess, so we'll discuss in closed session, but documents I'm producing says we will apply up to 5% of a preliminary assessed valuation, up to $10,000 for new residential or rental homes. What's the figure, 5% or 10%?
I have no idea
really
what you're
don't
looking
recall.
at.
Did the RDA decide 5% or 10%?
Right?
They didn't decide anything
Hey,
yet.
just go to sit down.
we had redefined our mission.
Well, I think you meant as a general practice.
General practice has been 10%.
In this 5% document. is what
Oh, the
was-
housing incentive, that's for single-family homes
Yeah.
It says rentals in there also.
and duplexes. That's not comparable.
Okay, we will discuss the math. I mean, that's what's in closed session.
All right.
But to me, it's pretty complicated.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
One question. Can you apply for multiple grants, et cetera? That's what I thought, but I
Yes.
just want to clarify that.
Yep.
So this one, really what we're trying to do, so this WEDC grant, there are.
Could you grab a
lots of-
microphone?
The WEDC grant is super competitive because it's first come, first serve. We've already been accepted, like the project has been accepted, so we got to get all of our stuff together and send it in right away. And it just happens to be that we have a really short turnaround for this HUD grant. So if we can get all of our ducks in the row for the HUD and submit both at the same time, I have, we basically have $200,000 already in it. So, and yes, the HUD grant is also very, very competitive, but it's not a first come, first serve. It's based off of how strong our partnerships are. So how much, so my in-kind donation of my time, my talent, my, looking for other things is included in all of that, as well as all of the partners that I had listed before, but also the City of Merrill. So, thank you.
Well, I have one other question. What happens if, let's say you get the CDI grant, but you don't get the HUD grant? So then you can't continue with the what would happen in that scenario? Or if there's like multiple pieces here, what happens if one doesn't come up far enough?
That's correct, yeah. There is, and you're totally correct, as we go through time, and I don't have a great amount of experience with this, so I'm learning as I go, but it's been a wonderful process. Complicated, as you all say, very complicated, but now without progression. So, right now it looks as if the $200,000 from CDI is a go. It lies with Rod and I and Elsa and Kristen as far as completing that application and getting it back to them. The HUD grant now with the deadline, now we handle that. It's step by step. If HUD doesn't go through, we go back to the drawing board, or I probably won't even wait for HUD to come through, but I keep going as far as trying to find grants or low interest rate opportunities as we go along. That's why each piece becomes really critical, incredibly critical, because the HUD grant is highly competitive. And as much as I believe in the building and as much as I want it to be, to come to fruition, I have to look at the economic realities of that as well. And so I keep going. Once that application is done and that timeline is met, the deadline is met, then I will keep going on other opportunities, definitely. Yeah.
Stephanie, I had talked to you earlier about numbers, and you talked about borrowing. I think it was more than the $750,000 and what the payback would be, and you kind of expressed your love for the building, but you still have to make money, and it still has to work.
Of course.
Those are our concerns.
Of course. Yep. Of course. Just like any project. And I've explained as well that I'm well employed elsewhere, and I'm not looking, my margins can be slim with this. It doesn't have to support me. And as far as longevity, I'm in it for the long term. Obviously, I've paid in taxes on it for all these years without getting back anything other than the ownership of the building, which is huge. And now comes the opportunity where, like Elsa was saying, this HUD grant came across, and we had to backtrack, and luckily it reopens, and now we go down this path, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity of going hand in hand with the community of Merrill, with the RDA, to do this. And I look at the possibility of 200 to 240 for TIF funds, and the comeback to that is a little bit as far as tax rolls. You know, it's a no-win almost for the city of Merrill, if I could put it that way. You will have a building there that, independent of me and my success or not success, but I don't even like to say that, has a building that is viable and adds something more than the tax rate on of what is pretty much a vacant building right now. And that's a value that continues on, not just for 10 years, not just for 5 years, not just even for the life of Stephanie. You know, it continues on for the life of the city of Merrill.
Maybe in closed session, Kristen, you could kind of go over what you have for a performer, just so we can kind of understand that it's going to.
I was just going to say I have done a pro forma. It's a 3-page spreadsheet. I'm absolutely happy to share that with you. And as a consultant and as an municipal employee, one of my biggest pet peeves, and you might have heard this before, is a developer comes to town and says, and I've actually heard this for a project in Merrill, I want to do this. What can the city do for me? You know, Stephanie is not coming here saying, I want to do this. What can the city do for me? She's saying, I've already put in, you know, $640,000. I'm willing to borrow $750,000. I'm willing to do all of this. The final gap after all of that is what we come to you with. When I do a pro forma, the last thing I say is, what's the gap after we've looked at everything? There may be other opportunities to replace that CDBG grant if it doesn't come through. We'll have to dig for those. And projects like this, I've told Stephanie, this is a process. You know, we work on the pro forma constantly. Can we charge more for rent? Can we charge less for rent? Can we get, you know, do we charge a CAM fee? I didn't put parking revenues in, but that's a wash, because I'm sure, I don't know if you're charging her for the parking space and she's passing it through to the tenant. So, you know, everything is iterative. And the first time I applied for workforce housing tax credits in Iowa, I got turned down because my pro forma wasn't baked enough. So I'm bringing to you the most baked pro forma we can possibly do right now at this moment, because I know how critical it is to making financial decisions. After we we fine-tuned everything in Iowa, then we were on the right track. My project in Forest City was so respected by the state that now I'm looking at a project in Pleasantville, Iowa, which makes even less financial sense. It's an old elementary school. It would provide 17 units. It's a beautiful building, but it's got to be gutted. We're looking at historic tax credits, and the state there is looking at a $1 million CDBG grant, but that's a $4 million project, and it's going to be an iterative process of how we fill that gap in the very end. So I can tell you that when I worked with the city of Merrill previously, this building was on, in Stephanie's ownership, and this is the closest I've seen it ever come, and this is really, she's at the finish line right now. So I'm excited for her and for you.
Question as far as city's 10%, if you look at the CB or CDBG grant and the CDI grant, $700,000. 10% of that, $70,000. The number is kind of, should those two grants be taken out of the total before our 10%? So it makes sense, because we're paying 10% of, we would be in this proposal, 10% of the grants. So it's $70,000 above and beyond the actual 10% of the costs outside of the grants.
It's all part of the capital stack, and I will leave it to you as appointed officials to determine how you invest in a project, but I don't ever take grants like that out, because they all contribute, and without one of them, we can't do the project. So we have to fill that gap somehow. Without, the 700, we'd be asking you for a lot more.
Right. I'm just saying it's really not 10% of the overall costs after the two grants are taken out. That's where I was looking at it. But
there wouldn't be a project without those two grants, though. So we're looking at total project investment. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of specific action, I did hand out a resolution, a draft resolution. We do need action on that to go to the council next week on the WEDC $200,000 grant.
I have a question on the resolution. Do we need to adjust the date for their HUD application grant?
At this point in time, their HUD application's due before the council meeting.
Okay.
The best you're going to be able to do is a separate letter from the mayor of support,
Okay.
because the council meeting's next Tuesday, the 12th. So you get two separate actions. One is on the resolution on the WEDC grant, and then separately, your previous action was to support submission of federal and state grants. So, Tom, do we need another action?
Probably a motion with just to clean it up would be appropriate.
On the HUD grant, a motion to authorize the mayor to send a letter.
Yes.
Just to clarify, this is the grant where we're just the pass through? No, the HUD one is one where we have to put money up? Yeah, the HUD one is, it's not the, which one are you?
This is the CDI grant, the
Yeah,
one
not
that
the HUD grant.
we had talked, the $200,000 grant.
Yeah, the HUD grant is the other one.
Correct.
Yeah, the CDBG.
Yeah, so this is the CDI grant. So this is one where we're just a pass through.
We already talked about it last
Yes.
meeting.
Okay.
But we need a formal resolution.
So this
That'll be
is-
going to council on Tuesday, so.
If approved by this.
Yeah, so if the resolution looks good, if we can get a motion a second to support the resolution.
I'll make a motion to support the resolution, the application by Winds and Paradox Incorporated.
I have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to support the resolution presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And I guess maybe you want to wait on the HUD until after close, or after
Yes.
closed session.
Yeah.
I think that's a bigger discussion that we need to have.
Okay. All right, anything else on this?
No, I think that's, we
We'll
can,
talk about the rest in
in
closed.
closed session, yeah.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to update on 2023 tax incremental generation and historical trends, TID historical trends.
We have a graph that was provided, providing history. For the 2024 budget, the TID's tax increment will generate just under $2,600,000. So it's been a tremendous growth the last several years, which is what our objective was beginning in 2015, that we needed to move faster to be in the position that we're at. So that's
And $500,000 of that goes towards payments to general fund?
the next agenda item.
We generated the income. Is some of that income going back to the general fund out of the 2,600? Is that what we're saying?
In terms of the 2024 budgets, which is the next agenda item, approximately $500,000 from the summary, which is in page 18 of your packet, will generate back to pay back the general fund advances. But basically, if you have any questions on where we've been, the reason it dipped down in 2018 is solely because 2017 was overstated, and there was an adjustment back, so, because of the previous revaluation of 1/1/2016. Otherwise, you'd have a more steady trend in going forward.
So if we have 2 million in projected income and we have,
No, the tax increment has, on the tax bill, is $2,559,191.
okay, and 500,000 is going back to the general fund, how much are we, what obligations do we have that we've already made for next year?
Are we ready? We're jumping ahead to the next agenda item.
Okay, well, the reason I ask is it's good to know where you're at with,
That's the next agenda item. There's a spreadsheet that summarizes it, basically page 18 of your packet. Basically, that gives you the summary of the total revenues, total expenditures, and the net. And basically, about $500,000 will be back, paying back general fund advances. And then you have the detailed budgets was provided of all the budgets, which includes all the obligations, current obligations for 2024 for the TIDs.
Does this include the project that Wendorf's doing?
Yes, it includes that. That was authorized by the council to potentially have $600,000 of improvements of Spruce Street. That's TID number 7.
I don't see that expense on here.
That is on page,
Oh, I see it. Okay, never mind, I see it. It's part of that 782 on page 18 on the expenditures.
T1, whatever that is there.
that's pages 30 and 31 of your packet have the capital investments. We have borrowing to offset that project as well. Proposed borrowing for the infrastructure. And you have a map of the, page 31 of your packet has the drawing of where, the concept of where the street, utility and street extension will occur. So if you have any questions on the budgets, be happy to answer those.
Yeah, right. Anything from the committee? You basically covered 7 there,
Yep.
correct? All right, moving on to number 8, next RDA meeting if needed to be Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024 at 8 a.m.
And I would suggest that we don't meet January 3rd, that you just plan on having a meeting on February 7th unless there's something that requires a special meeting before that.
So we'll just go to February 7th.
February 7th, yeah.
And then I'll call a special meeting if necessary.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the TID 7 Wendorf project's coming together until some point later in the month, so.
Okay. All right. Next
Ready to go
is,
move to closed session?
yep, next is closed session. The RDA may convene into closed session per Wisconsin state statute, section 19.85 sub 1 sub E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever a competitive or bargaining reason requires a closed session to consider sub A, negotiation of potential TID development incentives to facilitate future redevelopment of 410 West Main, the math is, I think it's 419.
419 is a
419,
typo,
yeah.
yeah.
419 West Main, TID number 8. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed.
I make a motion.
I have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion, a second to go into closed session. You want to call the roll?
Yeah, Haas,
Aye.
Bars,
Aye.
Sabaki,
Aye.
Kusero,
Aye.
Hartwick,
Aye.
Rebecca. Aye, I'm sorry. Carried, Mayor.
Thank you. We are in closed. We'll give.
But there's a bright spot we'll discuss.
All right, we're back in open session from the Redevelopment Authority closed session. I will make a motion to grant $80,000 towards the building, $40,000 on completion, and $40,000 a year after. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the letter of support. City staff, I'll make a motion to have city staff research the letter of support for the HUD grant and discuss it internally before moving forward with the letter of support. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
You got a second? So we got a motion and a second on the letter of support. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
I got a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.